Plastic pollution is a big problem in coastal areas all over the world. In this case, plastic from tourism, shipping and fishing, which ends up on the beaches of Texel. The wind, waves and tides move the plastic onto beaches and into dunes. On Texel, dunes can trap plastic, but we do not fully understand why some places in the dunes collect more plastic than the others. So we ask, how does structural complexity of coastal dune habitats influence microplastic accumulation on Texel's coastline? In our research, we looked at structural complexity of the dunes. The factors that play a role in this are the height of the dune, how rough the surface is, and how much vegetation there is. The hypothesis we have with our research question is that the macroplastic abundance will be higher in the complex habitat structure of the dunes with bigger elevations and vegetation complexities. This because plants and uneven surfaces can slow wind and catch plastic.
We chose 4 different locations to do our fieldwork at Texel because of the structural complexity differences. We selected the dunes and we have made different zones of them. So we have the foredune zone, we have the crest zone and we have the back dune zone. Each of those dunes we have measured alongside of a transect of 15 meters. This transect is 5 meters wide and is at the back dune, the crest and at the front dune. To catch the plastic debris, you walk alongside of the transect, you look inwards, and you search for plastic debris that is bigger than 2.5 centimeters, so macroplastic. After you've catched the plastic debris, we're going to analyze it by weighing the amount of plastic, capturing a photo of what the plastic is, and also by counting it and measuring the longest length.
In order to measure the complexity of the dunes, we used a chain method where we measured the linear distance, which was a set measurement, and then let the chain follow the different curves of the surface. You divide these 2 measurements with one another and then you'll get the rugosity of the transect. We did this by dividing the whole transect in 5 by 5 sections and measured the parameters of each section and then took the average of all of the sections together to have a final rugosity count. Next to that, we also finalized our methodology by measuring the vegetation density and vegetation height in order to also show how much rugosity there was in the dunes.
Firstly, we calculated the rugosity and the vegetation through the measurements we described earlier. When we plotted this data in a graph, we saw a correlation between the vegetation coverage / height and the rugosity, which confirms our measuring techniques are correct. But when we plotted the rugosity against the amount of plastic we saw, no clear correlation, as you can see in this example of one of the graphs. The line shows a decreasing trend. This means that with this data, higher complexity did not lead to more plastic in our first analysis. This suggested that our way of measuring complexity might not be capturing the most important factor. So instead, we looked more closely at our data and noticed that the dune height seemed to show a clearer pattern with plastic accumulation. Because of this, we decided to adjust our approach and measured the rugosity differently, measuring the height of the dune per 5 meters along the depth of the dune. Then we used the same formula to calculate the rugosity by dividing surface distance over straight distance. A higher R value indicates a more complex dune. In this picture you can see what the results are of this measurement. We plotted this new data against the amount of plastic in count per square meter and weight per square meter. In this graph you can see that when the height of the dune increases, the overall plastic count increases with it. To prove the correlation even more, we made these graphs where you can see that when the height increases, most of the plastic can be found in the foredune and the amount of plastic in the back dune decreases. So overall, with this new data, there's a strong correlation.
Our study shows that the way a variable like complexity is measured will strongly affect the conclusions drawn from the data. The first method we used was based on vegetation and physical rugosity and overlooked a key factor. Our later analysis revealed the topography of a dune, especially the height of the dune, was the most influential factor. This makes sense taking into account the natural function of dunes as physical barriers. Bigger barrier, more plastic trapped. There are several limitations to the data as well. In the fourth transect, the back dune was not included properly because of the campsite. There are also environmental factors, wind, recent storm events, and human activity that were and are impossible to account for. The study was limited by the number of transects that were able to be done within the field week, and all the measurements were taken at a single point in time with little background information or context to the area. This means that the results must be interpreted with caution and more extensive research is needed to confirm any observed patterns. Ultimately, our study shows that there is a pattern linking dune complexity to plastic accumulation. And although the original measurements failed to explain the research question, after adjusting our analysis, we were able to find clearer patterns correlating both dune height and rugosity to plastic accumulation. Our final conclusion is that the height of the dune is a better predictor of plastic accumulation than any other physical or vegetation-based measurement. That's everything. Thanks for watching.
Yes! Yes! Yes!